back to Sippin' and Bitchin', where the drinks are icy or spooky in this case, and the TikTok is spicy. We're on
talk?
book talk. Yeah, that's what it
You
always
said,
is.
yeah, you said TikTok.
I did not say TikTok. I said book
You
talk.
did.
Roll it back.
We'll play it back.
Roll it back.
It's so funny. You said spooky right when I raised my cup.
Anyways, this is episode 9, part 2, and we're your main bitches. I am Sam.
And I am Steph. We are. Y'all don't really need to know about this, but I'm going to tell you anyway because I like to share, little updates. But we're trying a new program to record the show today. And if it works out, fantastic. If it doesn't work out, well,
She's saying fantastic because if it works out, it saves her a lot of editing.
I just have to edit, but I won't have to edit
like
as much.
clipping. You won't have to do like clips and stuff as much. Hopefully.
So we'll see.
Listen, we do this all ourselves, guys. It takes a lot of time.
It takes a village of 2 bitches mostly. Yeah, so episode 9, part 2. To no one's surprise, we only made it through 5 chapters and a prologue. Hopefully today we'll make it through 6 or 7 chapters. I mean, we'll see. Well, whatever. We're prepared to go up to chapter 14, but the likelihood of that is very slim. Yeah. So, without further ado, like I said in the last episode, I am going to read this note from Jennifer to the reader. It is very important. If you haven't read the book, then still listen. If you've read the book, still listen. It's just important. Yes. This book contains themes and or discussions that some readers may find difficult to read. While there are no graphic scenes, there is mention of sexual assault, suicide, the death of children, and discussions of verbal, psychological, and physical abuse. If you need to talk with somebody about your experiences, there are people wanting to help, and there are resources that I will put in the description, as I did in the first episode. Or last episode. First episode of this book.
Yes.
Now. I think we touched on some of those tough issues, but I don't think we've really dove
we haven't
deep.
Gotten into the meat of it yet.
Meat and potatoes. Correct. Yeah. So,
like
this I also don't know if we're doing that now. We'll see.
I think we're still at the touch and go
portion of the evening.
Yeah. Because, I mean, we're still very early on in the chapter. Like, we gotta remember, we're still only at chapter 6, and it takes a while before she's willing to, not
discuss.
Push it away. Yeah. So, I mean, this is one of the differences between the 2 book series, is that the other one, there's some heavy stuff. Like, there's abuse and torture and stuff in it. But for the most part, it's very lighthearted and fun banter. So that's like fun banter with a little bit of trauma. This is like trauma with a little bit of fun banter. So yeah, it's a lot heavier.
It indeed is. And the chapter 6, honestly, it's a great segue into literally one of the trauma illusions, but not fully discussing it.
Mm-hmm.
But Sarah, the chapter starts with Sarah literally saying nothing really happened. Nothing else really happened. Nothing happened. All I could smell is stale lilacs. Honestly, what we should have done is created a bingo card. How many times does Sarah say nothing in this book?
Take a drink every time Sarah says nothing happened.
Take a drink, not take a shot. If it was a shot, we would be done.
My drink will be gone by the end of this chapter.
Correct. So that's where it starts off. Also, I realized that goes there and that goes there. Look at me go. I'm so smart.
Proud of you.
I really try. She's recollecting, or she's realizing, or coming back to reality. She's not in a gilded cage. She destroyed it, and she taken out Colas momentarily. She freed Ash. She has this realization that it's her and her strength, but yet she still is diminishing what's happening to her.
Right. Right in the very first chapter, she even says, I didn't even understand why I was so affected. I should be able to handle this better. And it's like, is that something anyone should be able to handle better? Like, if there's one
Uh,
thing my therapist taught me, it's feeling this stuff is actually healthy. It shows that you are healthy. So,
you're doing great, sweaty. Um, Also, side note, we forgot to mention this at the beginning, but Jennifer did a Zoom call about
yes.
this
Oh,
book, and we sat through it. We learned some things while also she just answered a lot of questions, and
and
her
refused to answer
background.
certain questions.
Yeah, well, she spoiled one thing, but really it wasn't that big of a thing, so it's fine. When we get to those parts where those things are mentioned, we'll kind of discuss.
Yeah.
Um, but I wanted to say that her background is in psychology, so she knows that's why a lot of the mental health stuff is so real and so like advocating for you to get help or discuss or process. It's because of her background. And I just wanted to say she's doing a great job.
She's doing it was very interesting to listen to her talk about like Colas too, and talk about like he's not a sociopath, even though he may have tendencies and like narcissism and things like that. It was very interesting to listen to, but very cringy to listen to because let me tell you, when you're listening to the creator of the book say the names the way they're supposed to be said, you want to cringe because you've been refusing to say them the way they're supposed to be said. Unfortunately, it is Sierra.
Oh,
Ugh.
should we talk about Sotoria?
You mean Satora
Mm, there was a lot of pronunciation. We're still gonna pretend like we're
or
pronouncing it
Nyctos?
correct. I'm not even entertaining you anymore.
Okay.
Um, so we transition into her kind of snapping back into realizing that she's like mid conversation with Ash, and he's like, "Talk to me." And she's like, "There's nothing much to say, but we do need to talk about Colas and what we're going to do about him." So then they get into a conversation about like what they're going to do to entomb him cuz we still can't kill him. Um and Ash says that removing him from power is something that they need to discuss with well, not everybody, but with Lila, Theon, and even Attis. Um, but they need to be on the same page as their partners because it's not just her ruling; she's ruling alongside with Ash and their team. I mean, they're always a team anyway, but ruling
It's
wise, they're also a
giving
team.
Poppy and Cass, and I love it. I love our women wanting to be equal with their men. Anyways,
I really want the crest as the Atlantean crest, like as a poster. Anyway, that was a
that'd be
side note.
really
That's not
good.
really important.
I'm sure we could
Um,
check Etsy afterwards.
Correct. So what they need to do to entomb him is ancient bone, and she comes to the realization that the true primal of life and the true primal of death can break through it. And then Ash says yes, but if the weapon is left in a primal, it severely weakens them. Whatever injuries they incur will not heal while the bone remains in place. So, I mean, foreshadowing for what's to come. Anyway, and
Dun, dun,
they're
dun.
all angry and wanting to stab him to no one's surprise. There are limitations for using ancient bones against a primal, even leaving it inside them. The ground will seek to restore them, pushing any bone blades from the flesh like a splinter, and roots will eventually crush the bone chains. Um, and they're talking about like a timeline, and for someone Colus's age, like a decade if they're lucky, it'll stay in. Um, and um, Then they have this discussion on how you still rule the Shadowlands, meaning you receive the summonses. Is that a word? I mean, I'm assuming it's a word because it's
What page are you
published.
on?
I'm on page 70, and I mean, summonses seems it's a word. Okay, it's fine. At the Pillars and beyond, but if Colas steps foot in the Shadowlands, he'll gain control of the Abyss, the Veil, and all those who serve the Shadowlands, including the Draken, because he is the true primal of death.
Dun dun
So
dun.
Ash ain't got no chance is really the moral of this story. Um and she's like trying to like
Isn't
figure
it
out
just
how what.
summons?
No, summonses. It should be just
Summonses.
summons in my head, but summonses
For
because
some
there are
reason, I want to
multiple
just pronounce it as summons. I don't know.
Um,
We'll just whatever. She
Pretend we're
says
pronouncing it
Sierra,
right.
okay?
um, so then they're still like trying to, figure this plan through, and Ash is just like, I'm assuming the Vendentia isn't helping with that, the foresight. And to no one's surprise, her intuition was not helping her in this moment. Um, but they realize that the knowledge is with the fates, but the likelihood of them telling them anything is slim to none. And then they were like, wait, Keela can probably help us. This is a recurring theme in this book, too. Keela just seems to be a main character in this book compared to all the other
Oh
books.
yeah.
Like, she's mentioned, but, like, she is, like, considering her age and, like, her background, she becomes a very important character in this compared to, like, Eos in the last book, or Belle, or, like, this is, like, primetime focus mode for her.
Yeah.
Um, so then they're like, we need to go now, essentially, but we have to meet with the others first. So their game plan is to find a way to entomb Colas and then start a war, essentially, which is inevitable. Which is funny because all of them never, like, even Poppy and Cass, they don't want to start a war, but inevitably a war is being started. So then it's like,
Mm-hmm.
uh, hello? It's fine. Not a problem. Um, and she talks about like why any primal could stand with him before and continue to do so now that there is a true primal of life. But they don't know her, so like, whatever. And Ash is just like, we won't rule as Colas has. Obviously, when your father ruled, did any of the other primals take part in the decisions? And so this is where she's talking about how like people should have, like, the courts should have a say. It shouldn't just be them two kind of coming up with everything. Um, she even says, because no two people, primal or mortal, should decide everything, especially when it comes to things they have no experience with and others do. Power should be shared. That's what the ancients did, right? The ancients shared their power by creating the primals. Um, so that's, she's like, I don't think one or two people should ever rule, and perhaps some of what has happened here wouldn't have occurred if the other primals were more invested in the decision making, which breeds this idea of her kind of creating a
A
court within the
council.
courts.
A
Council.
council
I
of the
was like,
primals. Yeah.
yeah, I was like, court doesn't sound right.
And I mean, it
Um,
makes sense for her to think that, having watched how her mother ruled and had the final say in what she was doing to the land. So,
yeah, so they are going back with this idea, and Ash is just like, you're being measured, and she's like, is it bad to be measured? And he's like, no, I just expected you to be more of the attack first and then think about it type. And she was like, that's my initial instinct, to go straight to Delos and take out anyone who stands in our way. But she's not doing that because it would be rash and impulsive, and it's not really a plan. Which, this also goes back to her being a monster. Like, she's thinking before she acts, which is very out of character, which we'll see in like later chapters, and people
right.
are noticing. But I do think she is doing her best to balance out like her
Yeah.
her
She
doubts.
recognizes her tendencies, and so she thinks
Mm-hmm.
she has to change them to be better, cuz she's in the state of seeing the worst of her tendencies and not the good that they've done. So she's like, "Nah, I got to change who I am and rule this in, and then things will be better," cuz she's doubting that part of her.
Yeah, exactly. So and then at the end of the day, she's like, Collis doesn't want war, and then they realize that someone's coming.
Dun dun dun.
So then we move on to chapter 7, where Ash is like, you felt something before I did. Your senses are progressing fast. Well, get wrecked, nerd. Um,
She's an overachiever.
and Ash is like, we have visitors, welcome ones. And guess who it is?
The
It's Jadis
baby.
and Reaver, but um and Jadis obviously missed both of them, but mostly Sarah, let's be real.
Yep.
Um And Nectus didn't really like. I think Nectus comes in later and like knew where his kids were, but Reaver didn't stop her. No one stopped her. They
Yeah.
really wanted to see both of them to make sure that they're okay.
I think they knew they
Reaver
needed to
asks,
see her.
yeah.
Yeah.
Reaver asks how she's feeling. Um, and Reaver was like, "We felt you when you woke up. Neck told us to give you guys some time, but Jadis had been scared. She didn't know where you went. No one would tell us where either of you went or let us see you when you returned." And Sarah was like, "They didn't want you to worry." And Reaver's like, "But we did worry, and even though no one would say it, I know it was him." You know how she did the italicized him with Poppy and
Hmm.
Cass, and now she's doing it to do talk about Colas. I don't like that. It's tainting the italicized. Anyway,
She only did the
gross.
him when she was refusing to say his name. So in that moment, he wasn't like Cass. It was just like, oh, him. So is it making it any better? Are you forgiving the italicized yet?
No.
Okay.
And Reaver's like, "And we didn't know if we would ever see either of you again." And his voice trembled and cracked.
Mm.
And he's like, "If you'd leave us, like," and he cut himself off. And Ash was just like, "We're not leaving you. We promise." That was a really good heart to heart moment. Oh,
Yeah.
I really hope we get some sort of insight into them being parents. Oh,
I know. Because I feel
oh.
like I know Nectus is basically Reaver's adopted dad, but I feel like Ash and Sarah are like their other parents, and it's just I love it so much. Can you imagine how close Reaver must have been to Iris and Malik when they were like young and growing up? Like I just my
I mean, they
heart.
had to have been so close where like he trusted them to take Jadis without him. You know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
there's that element because it's yeah, Jadis and Reaver are like the kids and they're like bonding with Sarah and Ash, but also there's this bond between Reaver and Jadis that
Yeah.
we like see, but right now it's like brother sister. But like for the like Reaver's very protective of her despite like the
Right.
banter. And so to trust the fact to like separate them, that's
Makes me I can't wait to
heavy.
find out what happened with Iris to make him wake Jadis. Oh, anyways, whole different book.
Whole different book that we don't even know for getting that shit. That makes me
Shut up.
sad. Anyway, um, then they're talking about grass and how everything is being healed. I'm gonna say healed because we are in a healing
Yes.
journey.
Yeah.
The lands, the minds, the relationships, healing
It's in its restore
something.
it's restorative era.
Yeah. But Jadis is talking about the grass, and Sarah is being able to understand her. So
Yes.
I think she was like, "I swore I heard her earlier, and this time I kind of just had a feeling about what she was saying. Either that or I'm hallucinating." Hmm, probably. Um, and uh, Sarah goes, "Did you know that it took Ash actual days before he could understand the Draken?" And Reaver's like, "I didn't." And Ash is like, "You're such a quick learner. I actually thought Ash was lying when he said he could understand you all." And Reaver's like, "He never lies." Which, I guess he never lies. I was trying to think of a time. I read this the first time and I was like, has he actually ever lied? I don't know. I don't know. And Reaver's like, "Did you really miss us?" And she goes, "Very much so. And I was worried about both of you. I was worried about both you and Jadis. I was also afraid." And then, mashing his lips together, he blinked damp lashes. Oh, Reaver's crying. Chest
I
squeezing, I
love it.
extended an arm. After a second, Reaver closed the distance between us and pressed himself against my side.
I love him.
Reaver, but I love that. I love it. But she's like, "We're good, we're safe, all of us, and we're gonna stay that way. I promise." A promise to Reaver, which is great. And then he fell asleep using her leg as a pillow, which is not surprising.
Nope. Kids can fall asleep anywhere. Especially
Um,
Draken.
and Ash was like, "How he was earlier, I haven't seen him like that since his parents died." And Sarah tells Ash of the promise she made Reaver and that they'll remain safe, and he said, "We will." And then in comes Nectus. "Where have you been, bud?" I'm giving him a face in case you're listening
Mhm.
to this on audio. um,
She's a little
and
suspicious.
yeah, she's like, "Oh, you just missed Ash. He took Jadis and Reaver to the chamber they normally sleep in." Um, and he's like, "I hope you got some rest after your eventful night." And she goes, "I did." And then they have this whole discussion about the room and how it looks. She's like, "Oh, it looks like a mess," and he's like, "It looks like it's lived in." Um, and like before, it was cold, neat, almost empty, and devoid of life. And Nectus is like, "It is actually a relief to see such a mess. There's a warmth to it."
I love that.
And um, I think there's some, not realness, but there's some sort of, when you buy a house or when you move to a new place and you so desperately want to make it a home. And I think some people think it's like decorations or doing XYZ thing, but it's really like the people that inhabit it and like the memories you make in it.
Yeah.
And I think that this is a testament to that moment. It's just like something as simple as just eating meals or like cuddling,
The bed
talking,
wasn't
having
made and like there was some clothes
like,
strewn about, like that was enough to be a big difference in how it felt in there.
yeah, which I think is super important, at least to me. But what do I know? I just work here. But yeah, so then Sarah tells Nectus that she heard Jadis through the
Telepe. Yep.
telepe. Yeah, that's what we're saying. I don't know if it's right. Um and Nectus said, "I believe we were right in assuming and our assumptions regarding the maturity of the embers." And then he goes, "I came here for a reason. I wanted to apologize for tonight's interruption. Both Jadis and Reaver were told to give you and Ash space." And she says, "Please don't apologize. I was glad to see them. I missed them, and I think they needed to see us to know we're okay. Especially Reaver, and I needed to see them. There was a time I didn't think I would see them again, and that makes me so sad."
I know.
And then she tells Nectus that they discussed Colas, and he was like, "I have no interest in speaking for the Draken." To no one's surprise, I don't. He's like the perfect person to do it, but
And
he
he's like,
also is the
nah.
one who won't do it. Oh, I wonder if would it be Jadis when she gets older, or it could be Aurelia. Like I'm wondering
I was
who would
thinking
step in,
Aurelia.
who they would trust the most to, like, long term. I guess really it could be now, and then as time goes on, they would switch it in theory, but maybe not.
Yeah. I don't know if they would
Uh,
see Jadis as too young because they still called Reaver a youngling at that point of Poppy and Cass, and it'd been how long?
that's also true. Point. Um, and then she wanted his opinion on if it's a good idea, and he said it's a change, but change is good, especially when it's needed. Um, and then she asks Nectus if he knows what the riders are. And Nectus is like, "What do you think?" And she said, "I think you know more than what you've shared with Ash." And Nectus said, "I was still of only one form when the riders came into existence, created to bring about the end." And she goes, "Gods, you're so old." Mood. And he's like, "Why did you ask me?" And she's like, It wasn't until I was having dinner with Ash that I remembered all the stuff I'd seen during my ascension. You know who the Fates are, don't you?" Then he nodded, saying, "I remember the ancients more clearly than the eldest of the primals. I know what some became." And she's like, "And you never told Ash?" And he's like, "No." And she said, "I didn't either. I almost did, but I had a feeling I shouldn't. That there would be consequences if I did, but I don't know why. I was wondering if you did." And
Hell.
Nectus says, "Power, ancestry. Some gods and mortals would seek to follow them instead of the primals. Those who would always align themselves with those they believed were the strongest, who they descended from in one way or another. We are lucky the array know the truth." And she's like, "What truth?" And he says, "That beings who wield control over life and death, the lands and the elements, those who hold within them such unyielding power, can never be in a position to rule, for they are blood and bone." Sorry. "The ruin and wrath of a once great beginning." A fine shiver crawled its way down Sarah's spine at the same moment cold fingers of dread pressed into the skin behind her left ear. Sarah thought about what Colas had sought to become, a primal of blood and bone, of life and death. And if we know
Good thing,
anything...
good thing that can't exist, right? There can't be a primal of life and death ever. They've said so.
Hmm.
Anyways,
And then she says the ancients, they held power over all, right, before they split their powers and went into Arcadia or became the Fates. Before them, a single ancient could influence gods and mortals to go to war or make peace. They could inspire invention and love, or slothfulness and envy. I love that word, actually. And ensure that the lands were as fruitful as a union between the two. One could turn an entire village, um, okay, I don't even know what word that is because it's also like split, so that's fine. Or curse every inhabitant with misfortune. It is because they wielded control over all life, all forms of life and death. Um, and she's like, so the part about them being able to create new realms wasn't hyperbole. And he says, I never saw them do it, but it was said that they could. But they could also undo the realms. They could topple the mountains and flood the lands. That is what some wanted to do. Not complete destruction, not a complete undoing of the realm, but they had done it before in different lands. And then she says, lands to the east and the west separated by unending seas and mist. I'm just saying, they're literally reciting the prophecy, just broken up.
yep.
I'm just saying.
Just a normal conversation that doesn't sound all ominous.
Correct. But a primal of life and death would not just be mightier than any primal, but a primal of life and death would be as powerful as an ancient once their essence reached maturity. So Poppy just rose as the
So,
primal of life and death.
yeah, so she won't be as powerful as an ancient right now. Like, she hasn't
So,
matured.
okay, so wait, hold on. I just had an epiphany.
Oh boy.
Or I just had a thought. Oh, this is a dark thought. I don't know if I want to say it. I don't think there's any way this would happen. But like since she would be as powerful, would her bones mimic that of the ancients, like ancient bone to like
Who's taking her bones out of her body to use them, ma'am?
I didn't think that far. I'm just thinking like if they don't have enough bones of the ancients or whatever to like I don't know. She's gonna leave
Poppy,
help. What do you
we
think she's
don't have
gonna
enough bones. We're gonna have to kill you and skin you and get your bones to use to bring these other ancient
don't
baddies
they
back down.
regenerate or something? Don't they heal
Ew,
at some
she's not
point?
a revenant. I think if you
But
skinned her,
like
that would be more disturbing. They're taking
honey,
her
you would
literal
just
bones. They're not.
no? Okay, never mind.
No,
I rescind my
this is a
statement.
horrible thought process.
Listen, I
One
just
for
know that she's
one.
gonna need so many people to help her, and so many people are gonna
Yes.
die in this next book to
So they're gonna use
maybe
her
kill
bones?
Colas. Maybe she'll like sacrifice herself for the greater good. You don't know her
Jennifer,
life
if you
only
use
does happily
Poppy's
ever
bones for
afters.
no. This is to Jennifer. If you're using Poppy's bones for anything, I'm done. I'm not reading more. That's my line. But no,
That's
I
your
think
line.
shut up.
Mm,
I think she would have to one reach maturity for her bones to be
yeah.
that powerful. And it was even stated that by Isbitch, I think, who said that like it would take her years to get powerful enough to do the stuff that she needs her to do.
Yeah, but I also think that there's never been a primal of life and death. So I think that yes, but also the rate at which she matures will be faster anyway. But I don't think they'll have enough time from when Colas like re-rises. I don't know.
I'm
Anyway, that was my
very
thought.
I am very interested to see what it is like when she wakes up because Sarah was born immortal with embers in her. She was never meant to be a primal. Poppy was technically not born immortal. She was just born a primal in a mortal realm. And then she started the culling and stuff. Like she wouldn't have gone into all that naturally if she was mortal.
But she's also oh, yeah, okay. Well, I don't know. We have so many more questions now.
But I don't think she was ever actually mortal, so Because
Yeah,
she
I
ascended
also
early, because that's why she didn't go into stasis earlier, because Cass ascended her before she completed the culling. So that's why she didn't go into stasis yet. So once she did complete the culling, like when her fangs came in and everything, that's when she was triggered to go into stasis, because that part was complete.
yeah, but also in the Zoom call in which we were participants of, she does. Ooh, do I say the spoiler?
Say it.
I'm gonna say it. Spoiler potentially for Primal. Uh, but she's not awake yet. We are assuming the book starts with her awake, but it's
She
not.
opens
She's
her eyes at the end of the
but
book.
there's like a flashback. Like I don't think we hold on, let me rephrase what I'm saying. I don't think it starts the next book, not the last book, the next book. I don't think it's going to start right away. I think we're going to get like a flashback because she said something to the effect of um oh my god, what if it's at the end of the book though? Oh, I'm going to rescind what I just said. I think there's going to be a different scenario in which she goes to ground.
Oh, she doesn't have um Sarah's eyes, because it says thick lashes fluttered, lifting to reveal eyes that held no trace of dewy green. Eyes that weren't even those of a god. They were the pure molten silver of churning ether as they locked with mine. They were eyes not just of a primal, but the primal of life and death, of blood and bone. So it ends with her opening her eyes and waking up.
So then there has to be a flashback, or there's going to be some situation where she has to go to ground.
She she goes into stasis. She said in the spoiler, again, this is a spoiler, that at the end of that, the roots did come up and start to go around her. You
I
don't
thought
have
she
to go
was.
completely to ground.
I thought she said there was another scenario in which the roots come back up.
I think she was saying that for primals that go to ground, they can start in it, because I asked, like, are they in a comfy bed or in the ground? She says they start there, but eventually, the longer time goes, it's going to pull you under the ground. It's going to cover you and encase you in the ground.
Hmm. Oh, speaking of stasis, actually, we'll wait till we get to that part where he comes in. We're gonna wait. We're gonna wait. We're gonna wait. Because if not, we're gonna never get through these chapters.
We're only on chapter 8. No, we're not even
7.
chapter 8.
Well, we're about to be on chapter 8. It's fine. Anyway, Sarah is saying about if Colas drained his brother and took the embers that way, he would have taken all of them. And he would have become the primal of blood and bone. He still could become that. And Nexus is like, will you allow it? And she's like, fuck no. And he's like, well, Ash, absolutely not. Um, and then at the end of this little blurb, it says, even when Colas was dealt with, a being of such power was not possible, which we obviously know is a freaking lie. Freaking lie. Anyway, and then she goes into a nightmare scene where she's like, I felt him behind me, beneath me, his body too hot, too still, weight crushed my chest. And she's having essentially a flashback nightmare moment, involving Colas. And she's like, this isn't real. I'd escaped. I freed myself. She's repeating this thing back to herself to kind of get her out of it. And she hears Sarah, and the nightmare disappears into a void. And this time, um, she thinks she feels the cool touch of Ash's lips against her brow. Um, and he, as she's falling back asleep, and that she was safe and will always be safe, and that he would be there to watch over her, keeping the nightmares at bay, which we know as the book progresses is not necessarily accurate.
Need help, but doesn't put it all away. But we start chapter 8 with her getting some of her own clothes back. And it's making her think about her time with Colas and how she didn't have a say in any of the things that she wore. And not having a choice was a huge part of her issues. But also, she says, it reminded me of my failed presentation as a consort. The gown I'd been forced to wear when I was first taken to the Shadow Temple. It too had hidden absolutely nothing and put me and nearly every inch of my body on display. So this is one thing that this book is really forcing her to do, is it's not only making her like, what's the word? confront what happened with Colas, but with her past as well. This is another reoccurring thing that's not just her time with Colas that she's healing from, but it's the abuse by the hands of like her family and the different ways that it happened that she is also having to kind of confront. And
She does this thing. It's really interesting because you see so much of her strength, but she really is and truly is the embodiment of bottling things up and
yeah.
like it's like that science project where you have to put the baking soda into the volcano and the volcano shoots
Mm-hmm.
out. It's like you're inching towards the volcano with the baking soda and like she's really right there at that tipping point.
Yeah.
I don't know why I went to that analogy, but here
No,
we are.
it fits, but I was thinking that too, how it just shows that the longer you like
Even
deny something and you hold it in and don't like allow yourself to heal from it, it just eventually there's gonna be a point and it just goes pop and pew.
yeah, it shows that you can be the strong. It doesn't, let me say this. It doesn't diminish your strength, but it also is a great illustration of the strongest people still suffer. If not, I won't say the most because there are people who, you know, can't find that strength and still suffer, but I do think that there's even the strongest people, like you don't know what they're going through or like the obstacles they're facing or that they have to overcome. And I think that Sarah is such a great example of that
Yeah.
because she is one of the most baddest bitches I know. I know
Right?
some bad bitches. She's definitely like at the
I
top.
know, you know me,
Um,
like
yeah, definitely was talking about you.
thank you.
Anyway,
Anyways, so she's sitting there and kind of thinking about that, and she's thinking, God, I gotta get a grip. Like, she's pushing it back down, thinking there's no way I should be like this freaked out about it. Looking around where she's been, um, and thinking about being in stasis and hearing Nectus, and she's feeling foolish for hiding in her bedroom. She said, I couldn't believe that I was hiding in my bedchamber because the idea of facing anyone without Ash stressed me out, especially not after everything I'd been through, all I'd done. And, you know, I don't blame her when you go through that. You're worried that when you see people, what is their reaction going to be? Are they just going to act like nothing's different? Or am I going to be bombarded with questions that I don't want brought up, kind of thing? So I don't blame her for that. But then there's a knock at the door, and it's our lovely Eos. She is here to see her, and she's a hugger, and we love her. And the first thing she comments on is her eyes, which I mean, if I saw those eyes, I'd be like, "Damn." They're still silver and green. Um, I love this line. She said, "Gods, why did I have to be so damn weird?" And I'm like, "Hey, that's me."
we love a socially awkward queen.
Yep.
That's fine.
Um, so they're talking about how she's a hugger, and she's like, "Oh, you seem like you're as fond as hugs as Belle is," and they're talking about how Belle probably doesn't hug even cats, and then she thinks about Hector, and that's just sad. Like we miss Hector so
We
much,
do.
so much.
Hmm.
Um,
No,
I
I
was.
just miss Hector.
I thought you were gonna say something else.
No, I just miss Hector. I do think like Hector is. Mm, I know there are other people now, but I do think he's very like comparable to like Delano and Emil and all of like I just think that it's a very lively bunch.
Yeah,
That's
it
fine.
was a very
I'm
lively
sad.
bunch. Eos is trying to thank her for saving her life, and Sarah is feeling awkward because she can't take thank yous.
Hmm.
Um, but she was actually apologizing to Eos because she was like, I didn't know if you had gone into Arcadia and if maybe you were okay with being there. And Eos had to tell her, no, you did the right thing, just like you did for Belle. Um, and she's like, yeah, but you were dead longer. I didn't know if your soul had passed on yet. And she reassures her, saying, like, I don't remember if I did it or not, so it doesn't matter. Um, but basically giving her the reassurance of you made the right choice and this is where I wanted to be. I wasn't ready to go yet.
Oh, this is my note. Sorry. I just want
Yeah,
to
I
say
was
this
trying
since
to.
we're here. I had the thought, me and Sam split the notes, so like this is just a thing I wanted just to discuss. They make it a point, not every single time, but to make sure that she understands that every time she revives not everyone, but like a mortal or whatever, that someone dies in their place. And I was
Mhm.
just curious if I feel like this is too nitpicky or like too like um minuscule in the grand scheme of things, but I wonder if like people that like matter in the grand design of life, like if we figure out who those people are that died in place of, and then if like they had significance. Will we?
I
Probably not.
feel like
But
there's
like,
only one of those cases that we ever hear of in the books, and that's when she saved Marisol and her stepdad died, and you learn that that was the life that was taken for Marisol. But I think that's the only time it ever mentions like knowing them.
yeah, I don't know. Also, I think that it's weird that the balance is like you revive a very powerful person, but like no one dies in their place. I mean, it's fine. Balance, I guess.
Uh,
Whatever.
you revive a god and 5 mortals die.
I'm
Uh,
just, I don't think that that should be the payment,
no,
but
I
like, I
get
just
it.
feel
It's
like
very
there should be
interesting how it's
something.
only for mortals. But
Mm,
that's where the balance is.
that's fine. Whatever. Anyway,
Anyways, but sweet Eos, um, I think if there's anyone that could talk with her right now, it's Eos.
correct.
Because she's been through that. But
So
but yeah,
tragic,
no, they're
honestly.
thinking about that when there's life, there's death. And how she explains to Eos when she brings someone back, another one dies. Um, and she freaks out, being like, "Did someone take my place?" And she's like, "No, I'm sorry. I should have clarified. It only happens with mortals, not gods or Draken." Um,
Yeah, see Gemma. When she
yeah,
brings Gemma back, like,
yeah, but yeah, it is a very interesting thing to know. I wonder if Ash, if he goes to Pillars, if he can sense which one's lives got traded. Um,
oh, that's
like
a good
that
point.
would be interesting.
Hmm. Anyway, not important, I guess.
Yeah, it's just those things you wonder. It's okay.
Hmm.
Um,
Oh,
oh, and she's
goodness.
like regretting not being able to save Orphine or Ector, but which is sad. Um, Eos is like, continue. This is interesting. um, and Eos is like, I feel like I may have been inappropriate, and you're my queen. And she's like, that doesn't matter. um, but they start kind of. Let's see. This is one of the chapters I don't have like any notes in, so I'm like reading as I go.
Oh,
Hmm.
well, so it's really this back and forth of like, how do you know when to bring somebody back, which I think goes
Right.
into, I think this is like not part of her foresight, but it also feels like an intuition based thing. Um, like she says, she's thinking about knowing when to use the ability to restore life and when not to. She understands she can't bring everyone back, but like it's in her nature, so how does she not do it? Um, and then it goes into this whole like, well, how do you decide who deserves to live and who doesn't? And then her foresight is just like you don't know who deserves it and who doesn't. It's like
Right.
when you're playing Among Us and like you're that role that can wreck somebody, but then if you get it wrong, like then you die in their place. I know it's not one
Sheriff.
for one. Sure, that sounds right. I don't know the rules still.
Okay.
Um and then she's just talking about how like it's not her place as the primal of life to intervene in the natural order of things. But then she's like, well, what was natural about how Ector and Orphine died, or her, or Eos? There was nothing
Oh,
natural
right.
about what Kin did when he attacked the Shadowlands. That can't be a
Oh,
part of the natural order of things. Which also, the I mean, that's a very good point. Like, if they're unnaturally killed, like, how does that. I don't know where the balance is and why the fates didn't step in at that point. That doesn't make
Right.
sense to me.
We don't understand the fates and their choices, honestly. Um, they like to say they can't intervene, then they intervene. But then when it comes to points where you think they should be able to intervene, they don't intervene. And it's really annoying.
Yeah.
um, yes, he is. Steph just put a very important note in about
Mm-hmm.
Kin, who we love so much. Like, we look up to him. Actually, we prefer to look down at him while he's 6 feet under. But they're starting to.
True.
I'm reading this page. They're starting to talk about the attack on the
Yeah.
Shadowlands with Kin,
Yeah.
and
But
how he kind of like went straight for Eos. Like, he like had a vendetta against her because when she was a chosen, Colas had promised her to Kin, basically, kind of like she promised Sarah to Kin.
I don't know. PTSD for sure.
Yeah. So he just went like right at her, and it talks about how Ector saw it happening and tried to stop Kin, and that's what basically got Ector killed. Um, and she says Ector's death was quick. At least there was that. Kim may have been
Every
following
time we bring up
orders.
Ector.
I know, I just hate it. Kin may have been following orders to attack the Shadowlands, but he enjoyed it. He likes the pain and fear he inflicts because he is a cocksucker, like Steph said in our
That is
notes.
what I said. Mm-hmm.
And she tells Ao, she says, "Tell me I can't go to Vathi and rip out Kin's innards." And she says, "You probably shouldn't do that." And she said, "Probably?" And she's like, "Okay, you definitely shouldn't do that." And she says, "I shouldn't. It would be very unprimal of life-like behavior if I did."
She's not wrong.
And Ao says, like, "Uh-huh. By the way, your eyes kind of changed. The green turned gold, which is not a color we've seen before in these eyes. They were
Mm-mm.
gold and silver. But they're back to green now, and her voice went different. It was breathy, hot sound. It was this breathy, hot sound.
It's primally.
Primally. Uh, and she says, "I heard your voice inside my head."
Mm-mm.
Like, that's a little creepy.
Wait. Is that like my like telepathy like rain or rain?
I wonder if it's a primal ability, because we remember when at the end of Flesh and Fire, no, not Flesh and Fire, at the end of A Light in the Flame, when there's the attack, Nyctos is like full primal mode, and she can hear him in her head telling her to run. So I don't know if it's like a primal to primal, not primal to primal, but if it's like a primal ability when you're like going full primal, because she says, "I think you're going full primal of life." Um,
Maybe.
and she asks like if she looked different. She said, "Please tell me I didn't turn into a skeleton." Um,
She's the primal of life. Why would she turn into a skeleton? That was my like, honey,
I
you would turn into
I
like
I
something
think it's
else.
because she's seen Colas and Nyctos go full primal, and their skin gets really thin, and like you can see their bones and stuff. So that's what she associates it with.
I
But she
guess.
reassures her and says, "No, your skin took on a golden hue. It was actually very pretty." Um, but oh yeah, she did. She says, "I'd only seen Ash and Colas do that," so she was worried that she looked like them, which is honestly mood. I don't blame her being worried about that. Um, but then she kind of calms down and she does something kind of big. She looks at Eos and says, "I will make sure Kin pays for what he did. No matter what happens from here with Colas, Kin will be punished. That I swear to you, Eos." And so basically, she made an oath to her. And an oath made by a primal cannot be broken.
Mm-hmm. Oh well.
Hmm. Hmm.
He deserves to die, Loki. High key. Period.
uh, but yes. So they do that, and they're kind of calming down from that, and then Sarah goes, "So, Belle?" And they start talking about Eos and Belle and how they used to be together, But she's like, oh, it was like 18 years ago, almost 19. It was a long time ago. Or no, it wasn't that long time ago. She says, I'm sorry, you two
Two
were almost,
decades.
yeah, we're together almost 2 decades ago. And she says, yes, why do you look confounded? And she says, because you speak of 2 decades like it's 2 months. And that's where she says, compared to the span of a mortal life, it feels like an equivalent comparison. Eventually, 2 decades will feel like 2 months to you too, which is really hard to imagine. I know we kind of talked about that in the last podcast episode about the time thing.
There has to be a time jump. This next book has to be a time jump. Well, I guess it's a time jump in the scheme of Sarah and Niktos, but not time jump. Like I don't think we're getting the in between. Like I
I
think
think
we're just getting the revival.
no, I don't think. I think you're talking about Primal, right?
Yeah,
I think it's just going to pick up right where a soul took off, like ended.
correct. That's what I mean. So I don't think we're gonna get like it's a
I don't
time.
think we're
Well,
going
no,
to get a
sorry.
time jump. I think via conversations with the other primals is how we're going to piece together what happened in the time
You would
beforehand.
think. We can only hope. I got no faith right now.
And so yeah, so they're talking about them being together, and we love that for them. And then they start to get into the nitty gritty. Like Eos is like, "Okay, we've been here chatting. Time to kind of like really see how you're doing." And she says, "How are you handling everything?" And not in regards to like the whole primal thing. Um,
I'm fine. What a classic. What a classic line.
who would say that? Like that's almost too on the nose. But she's kind of trying to get her into talking about what she went through. And she even said, when I asked how you were doing, I wasn't asking about how you're handling the ascension. And she like immediately tenses up and like starts to close off. And she starts to ask her questions about her time in there. And she's like, no one knows what happened, just what we heard. Like it was saying that you were sitting beside Colas at court. But when Rain and others saw you, you were not free to move about. And she said, I was never free to move about. And that she was basically on display. And she's like, and she reassures us that none of us believe you wanted to be there. None of us. It just made us worry more. And she's kind of like in defensive. She's like, well, what else did you hear? And she said there were whispers about your attempting to escape, and that Colas claimed he hadn't given you and Niktos permission for the coronation, which we know was a freaking lie. Then only what Rain said, and she's now like worried about what he said. Like, did he tell him what she had offered? And he said that you convinced Colas that freeing him was the best way to handle the situation. So showing that Rain hasn't told people the truth of what happened, just that she tried to convince him, which is like, we love Rain for that, like understanding that that part of everything was not his to share. That was something that she was dealing with, and that was her story. And so she's starting to like doing her breathing, she's feeling the feels. And she's like, I want you to know I'm just sorry for what you experienced. And this is where she goes into denial. She's like, with some help, I was able to convince Colas that was Satora. Because of that, I got lucky. And she says, lucky compared to who? And she's like, to those not sitting here who are free of Colas. And she's like, very true, but I know the whole time I was held and made to listen to him, he only ever spoke about her. And we know who her is. Because he's a fucking obsessive creep, like Sarah puts here. But she's like, so I know my luck traveled further, and Eos just says, I'm here to talk if you want to talk. And she's like, I appreciate that, but what happened when I was there? It was nothing. Like, honey, no. Her lip Eos was speaking, her lips were moving, but all I heard was, it was nothing, echoing over and over. But it was Investis's voice. The primal bitch of rights and prosperity had said the same thing in response to what Colas had done to her. And as much as I hated her for what she'd done to Ash, it hadn't been nothing. What had been done to me wasn't, and then she like starts to panic. Um so I like how it's funny that she can look at Vessus and say that she says it was nothing and she knows it was nothing, but yet she continues to say it was nothing. It's
She's
like, do you
belittling
not
her own
see?
experience.
Yeah. And she asks her, she says, when you were held there, were the chests in the cage, were there chests in the cage when he kept you? And Eos got really quiet and she says, I know what was in them. And I know that like your luck couldn't have traveled much further than mine. And she starts to apologize for bringing it up. Eos tells her not to apologize. She says, I get it more than anyone here, maybe more than even Nyctos. I get it. The anger, the fear, the fucking awkwardness, the helplessness, and the goddamn choking shame. I know how all that feels, how all those feelings become something worse than any act committed against you. Because that anger, the fear and awkwardness, the helplessness and shame, they get into you, into your very marrow, and it's hard to claw them back out. You will say and do anything to avoid feeling or thinking about it, but eventually you have to, because no matter what, Sarah, it wasn't nothing.
Yeah, Eos is out here. I like that out of everyone that came to give her a pep talk, it was Eos. Like
Yeah.
it definitely not humanized the experience, but like it's like a support group, like
Yeah.
being
The show
relatable
not
in
being
terms
alone.
of exactly. Um so then that goes into chapter 9. Um and essentially this picks up just minutes after Eos has left. Um And to no one's surprise, Sarah is invalidating her feelings and her trauma and minimizing the fuck out of it. And she goes, she had meant well, but she was wrong. What I'd experienced in Delos was nothing like what those who had come before me had to deal with. I hadn't been forced to use the toys I'd found in that chest. I hadn't been tossed aside and given to gods who behaved like a pack of rabid dogs. I was lucky. And then she has the internal, but why didn't it feel that way? And I'm just like, because you fucking went through trauma, honey.
Because it's just like, it's one of those, just because you didn't go through what you know they went through doesn't mean you didn't go through stuff that was just as traumatic for you. Like,
And
your
that is
experiences don't have to be the same for them to be any more or less traumatic.
ugh, unbelievable. So then she's like tipping her head back to the sun, inhaling like the rejuvenated environment in which she is living in. And she has this thought of like what's happening in Lysania, like what does Ezra think, what does her mother think? Um and um they essentially like the people of Lysania would have a future. Ezra and Marisol could plan for a future, and that of coming generations there was hope. And then Sarah's like, once the shock lifted, they'd begin to think about how this was all possible and how, like, her family probably assumed she was dead. What else would they think? They both knew I couldn't survive what we'd believe to be my duty. And that always bothered Ezra. And her mother just accepted it because I don't know if I really like her mom still. The jury's still out. Like, she is a bitch, but also,
She has
mm,
somewhat of a redemption arc before her
yeah,
death, but
sort of, kind of. Yeah, I get, yeah. I don't know. There's something more touching about the redemption arc with the mom versus like if we were get a Callum redemption arc. I don't know how that would
right.
work.
I feel like it wasn't redemption-y enough. Like, yes, you understand why she did it and like what she was going through, but you don't forgive her for what she did either. So it's a
Yeah.
weird balance.
It's like acceptance but not forgiveness.
Mm-hmm.
Which, you know.
Poppy teaches
But
that.
it's yeah, very mindful. Very never mind, let me not do that.
Don't go into demure.
Essentially Sarah wants to see Lysania for herself, and then she like is looking out into the not abyss, but like looking out of the window.
I hope
And
not.
then she sees the red woods and she's like, good gods. She sees that the large swath of crimson leaves was afire in the sun in the sunlight, a sight just as beautiful as the sky, despite the blood of the gods entombed beneath them that gave the leaves their vibrant color. Gods that were as
Mm.
cruel as kin. Um, Not all, quite a few had been placed there by Ash, but I knew beneath those trees were the worst sort. Some were power hungry, others were lost to bloodlust, many were abusers, rapists, most saw mortals as beneath them and only suited for worship and servitude. And they were also loyal to Colas, which is a terrifying thought considering where Primal is about to reconvene. But her essence throws into her, and she's just like, well,
I
why the
could kill
fuck
them
don't I
all.
kill them? Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
she was like, why couldn't I just kill them? And she like stops, she calms herself down, and she's like, had I been seconds away from feeding them just to kill them? And she was like, yeah, pretty much. And she was like concerned because she needed to kind of focus and get real. Um, and she was like, it wasn't like anyone would be all that mad about ending those gods, but was that really how I wanted to start my reign, with what felt like an abuse of power, something monstrous, something Colas would do? Um, and then she was frustrated with herself, but then she watched a guard patrolling, and this is where her um, foresight knowledge, learning everything about a person just by staring at them situation happened. And
That
she
movie's so
learns
weary. So weary. So
Eamon
weird.
Icarian. And then she like learned all the details about his life.
The
Um,
whole thing about him, like,
if like he comes more into play like later, or if this was just a
does
random
he?
illustration of her abilities.
I think it's a random illustration of her abilities. I'll
Well,
highlight his name just in case.
just in case. Anyway, then Ash returns, and then Reaver lands on the railing, and she's like scared shitless. She's like, I know you can fly, but that doesn't mean there aren't other more suitable resting places. Literally any place else that doesn't make me feel like I'm about to have a heart attack. And she's like, there's a daybed right there. And Ash is like, he just wants to be close to you. Jadis, on the other hand, is currently terrorizing Belle.
Poor Belle.
And they're talking about how Reaver grew 2 inches in the last couple of weeks. He's at the age where he'll
Aww.
hit his first growth spurt. In a few months, he'll be almost twice the size he is now. And then Sarah's like, well, when will he have another one? And Ash says, another will occur in a few years. He'll be larger than Odin by then. Speaking of the warhorse that resided in his cuff. And they debrief about the Aos coming by,
Competition.
and she brings up Theon. And there's just an update that no ships had been spotted beyond ours. If another court outside Vati was planning to launch a sizable attack against the Shadowlands, bringing with them gods that are unable to shadow step from court to court, we'd be able to see them from the cliffs in the Bonelands. Vati, I don't know if I'm even saying that right. The court ruled by Attis and Kin was across the Black Bay. If Kin wanted to move his armies toward the Shadowlands as he had before, he wouldn't go into the open seas. He'd simply need to cross the bay. So they're kind of like uniquely positioned in the grand scheme of like getting attacked. Um, and they're talking about Vathi and Lotho and this and that, and how Maya's court is joined and a narrow land bridge connects it to the court of Surta, but like moving forces that way would be unlikely at the moment, and because it'll take longer. And apparently Surta is still a mess, but Hanan kind of ruled it that way, so get wrecked, nerd.
Ugh,
Um,
these primals, man, having to clean up their messes.
yeah, and she makes this comment about not that I want to make it seem like Hanan wasn't responsible for his actions, but it's partly due to Colas. Like she's still trying to give people the benefit of the doubt, which I think is wild. Um, the moment he stole those embers, oh, Ash is saying this. The moment he stole the embers from Ethos, a different kind of rot invaded the courts, twisting what us primals were meant to stand for.
I feel
Um,
like
and,
in that scenario, it's more of a people. Yeah, I get it. They want to say, "Oh, it's mostly because of Colas," and I get it. But I think this is just how they were inside, anyways. And Colas ruling just allowed them to be that selves. Whereas if it was Ethos or something,
yeah,
they would have been more subdued because Ethos is ruling. But with Colas, they were like, "Fuck it, I don't have to follow a certain way. I can be who I want to be," type thing.
yeah, it's like Like the light and the dark side, it's like when you feed that part of yourself, like the roots are still there, you're just allowing it to grow inside of you, and I definitely think that all it did was nurture that. Um, and she tells Ash about the oath she made to Eos about kin, and said it was kind of reckless. And Ash, of course, is making light of the situation, saying he enjoys the reckless side of
Hmm.
her. But essentially that Kin would be punished for what he did to her and Hector. And Ash is like, why would I be mad about that? And she says, because the first thing I did as queen was to make an oath to potentially kill another primal, one who was the twin of another who was our ally, and I did it without conferring with you first. And Ash just kind of laughs at her. And he's like, while I would appreciate you discussing such things as this with me first, I also expect that your temperament will prevent that on occasion. AKA, he knows her well enough to be like, you're gonna do shit that, like, ask for forgiveness later.
Yeah. And I think he trusts her enough too. He knows that like her temperament can get her in these situations, but he also knows she would never agree to something that she felt was actually wrong to do.
Yeah, I like it's one of those things where it's like she still has common sense. She still has mostly common sense. So,
Yeah.
you know, then she shares that she looked at Iman and that she learned everything about him. And Ash is like, my father could do that even after Kolos took the embers. It was the only ability of the true primal of life that remained. Um, and she's surprised that like everything is growing stronger already. And Ash is like, I'm not. Is that what you were thinking about when I arrived? I could sense your unease. And then
Him and his
she
sensing, man.
honestly, and then she tells him about the redwoods and like some letting the gods free to
Yeah.
or whatchamajinker, the entombed
How
gods
she wanted to
free
kill
to
them.
then wreck
Yeah.
them. And he was like, "Why didn't
Fuck
you?"
him
And
up.
she's like, "Are you serious?" And he's like, "As the true primal of life, you could have done it, and it would have been within your rights to." And she's like, "If I would have done that, it would have been an entirely different kind of reckless." Um, and then they kind of compare the situation to like Colas. Um, he was within his rights to do a lot of shitty things just because he was king. And Ash was like, and because he was king, did it make it what he did right? And she's like, obviously not. Um, and she says, I didn't do it because I knew it wasn't right, even though it really felt like it was. And he said, glad you figured that out. I was starting to get worried. I hate him.
I
It's like
love
the mini
him.
tests that just unbelievable.
It just shows that he
Um,
knows her. Like she's worried about this stuff, and he's just saying, like, look, this isn't something that has worried me because I know you.
mean, true. And then she asks, like, do you think that some of the entombed gods have had a change of heart, or were you just trying to make a point? And he's like, not all of the entombed gods committed unforgivable crimes. Some made bad choices, some acted upon Colus's orders because they were given little choice. A few are likely far less guilty than I am given the crimes I've committed.
Correct.
And Colus didn't tell Sarah anything about the crimes he committed. Um, and he just he didn't elaborate. Well, that was pretty much the end of that conversation. um and she asks, how long do you think before all the grass comes back? And he's like, several rainfalls. um and the rainy season, is months away, so ripper dipper all the grass or most of the grass growing. And then they're talking about meeting up with everyone, and she's like, I'm ready, I just need to find a comb to do something with his hair.
Hmm.
And he's like, you don't have to do this. And she's like, I know, but I want to. And he's like, um, she, he says, your anxiety spiked. And she said, my anxiety is always spiking.
Mood.
And he's like, it doesn't have to be right now. And she's like, I appreciate what you're doing right now. It's sweet. Not only am I ready to do this, I feel fine. But if I start to feel like I'm hiding, I won't feel fine. And he's like, you're not hiding, I'm hiding you. And I was like, you're hiding me because you don't want me to get overwhelmed. And he's like, damn straight, you've been through a lot and they can wait. And she's like, we're going to have this meeting. We need to. Colas may be holed up in his court recovering, but he won't stay that way for much longer, and we can't waste time. Um and uh she like they're getting ready to head to the meeting, and she's like, cave cat. And he's like, what? And she said, I had a dream while I was in stasis. It was right before I woke up. I was at my lake and I saw a cave cat standing on the shore, a silver cave cat. All primals have, what is it called? A noda, an animal they can transform into, right?
Right there.
And
It's right there, Sarah. I'd seen something else but couldn't focus on the memory. It's right there. Sorry, I have this whole thing about her discovering that she's pregnant and it makes me mad. Anyways, continue.
then she says that the cave cat felt like her. Can I shift into a cave cat? And Ash is like, I don't remember seeing anything like that during stasis, but it could mean that. It usually takes time for a primal to first shift into their Noda. Took him about a year. Um, and she's like,
Oh,
with
baby
you being a
Ash.
wolf and me being a very large cave cat, it's like cats and dogs, right? And I know a wolf isn't a dog, but still. Um, and she's like, how do I shift? And he says, you will it to happen, but don't do it right now. For one thing, I don't know if you'll be able to, but on the off chance you can, it wouldn't be wise for you to do so if you plant me with the others. He was like, the
See,
Noda is
I
strong
don't
and
know if
it'll
I'd be
want to
able to
take
help
over.
it. I'd be like, I want to try right now.
You're part of the problem.
Oh, 100%.
Anyway, so they're at the door ready for the meeting, and he's like, just remember when you walk through the door, or she says to him, just remember when you walk through the door. Oh no, he says to her, just remember when you walk through that door, you will not do so as a consort. You will be doing it as their queen. And she goes, and you as their king. And then he says, together. And she says, always. And then we go and meet our besties, bro. We meet our
Woo-hoo!
besties.
But not in
Um,
this episode.
Yeah, I don't want to rush through this meeting
Yeah.
with our besties, so we will carry this up. Part 3 to
Listen,
no one's
guys,
surprise.
let's see, we made it 4 chapters. We got 4 chapters. Look at us go.
We're doing great. There's only 65 and 2 epilogues.
Listen, we knew it was going to be like this, so we have no
Yeah, we
shame.
should at some point we should be able to fit in 2 episodes a week. Our schedules are just kind of a little crazy,
Yeah.
so we
We
have to
usually
kind
try
of
not to record
work.
the day before the episode comes out because that's just chaotic, but that's our lives right now.
Also accurate.
But yeah,
But
school
yeah,
starts up soon, so we'll have more time in the day. Like, we'll
yeah,
slowly get there.
we'll slowly get it together. But sipping and bitching on everything. Our Discord server is open to everyone. It's linked in our bio, our Instagram bio, and on our link tree. But TikTok doesn't let me put a link yet, so
Come on,
just
TikTok.
go to that. But yeah, we do have so for any patrons, you have separate sections that are exclusive to y'all. But we wanted to kind of spread the wealth and let y'all join in. So
We've been talking about
um,
books in there.
mhm.
We're just
And
honestly
boba.
just chatting and talking about different books and just life, and it's been a great time. So yeah,
Yep. So yeah, sipping and bitching on everything. Um, we have been blessed enough to get some arcs. I know I've had 2 that I've read and reviewed. Sam is working on a couple for her that she's waiting to get in. I have to read 2 more. Listen, I
Stephanie,
really
listen,
just did
we
mine.
we found a way to see all the arcs we applied for, and Stephanie hates herself. Let's just say that
Correct.
she's got a lot of reading to do.
I'm doing the Lord's work here.
You're doing
But
something.
listen to us on all the things. If you're watching this on YouTube, make sure to like the video and hit subscribe so that you can get up to date with our stuff. If you're listening to just the audio, make sure to please rate our show. It'll really help boost the discoverability of it.
Comment where you can comment, share where you can share. Just spread the love.
Yes, we do have a Patreon, but it's not required. The best thing that you can do for us is share our show.
Yes.
And yeah. So we'll catch you on the next one. We'll update on social media when we get a pulse on when our next episode will be.
Yep.
For now, we'll catch you later, bitches. Bye.
Bye.